system. And our nervous system, its function in our bodies is to detect or take in information from the outside world and interpret it and sometimes respond to it in certain ways. So we take in information, process it, and then use that information. Okay? Control parts within our body as well. And so our nervous system is composed of some main parts. Okay? And you guys at the beginning of class, say you named just about all of them. So obviously the brain. Okay? The brain is an organ of the nervous system. And it's obviously very important. It's the main control center of our nervous system. Our brain takes in a vast amount of information from all of our senses, from within our body. It interprets it and then determines how to respond. The spinal cord is another important part because the brain sends out messages to various parts of the body. For example, right now, your brain is doing many things at once. It's listening to my voice, so it's taking information in through your ears, through your eardrum, into nerves, which bring it into your brain. Your brain hears the sounds, interprets them into words, understands the meaning of those words. And right now, your brain at the same time is looking at the screen. It's looking at the words on the overhead. Your eyes are bringing that information into your retina. And your optic nerve is bringing that information to your brain. Your brain interprets what you see into words. And then you put those words and understand their meaning. At the same time, your brain is also directing the muscles in your hand and wrist and arm how to write down the notes that you're writing. So it's sending information out as well as taking information in. For your hand and arm to be able to write out your notes, your brain says, okay, here's how you should move your hand to form these letters. That information starts in your brain, goes down through the base of your brain, and starts traveling through your spinal cord. As we talked about, your spinal cord is contained within the vertebrae. This is a little model here. These are the vertebrae. This is your backbone. This would be like in my back, like this. Okay? So here's the little bumps I could feel in your spine. That's what these are. If you look, there's this yellow. This is the spinal cord. There's a little tunnel sort of through each of those bones. The spinal cord travels all the way down through your back. Okay? If we look at this skeleton, you can see it goes all the way down here. And then along the way, what you see is the spinal cord has these branches. They're coming out of the sides of the vertebrae. So they branch off. Those branches bring the information from your brain to the various parts of your body. So as you're writing your notes, your brain sends a message. It goes down the spinal cord. Okay? Then it branches out. Because this message is going to your arms, it branches out up here. And then it starts to travel through nerves down through your arm that are attached to the muscles in your arm and your hand and your wrist. And your brain is telling them how to move. Okay? So information that your brain is sending out goes from the brain to the spinal cord to the nerves that are spread throughout the body. This diagram, all those green things, those are all the various nerves that go throughout our body. They all attach to various organs and muscles and so on. Hold on. The same thing is true if you feel your paper, your desk. What's happening is sensors in your skin feel the texture of your paper. They send that information through nerves back up through your arm into your spinal cord and then up to your brain where your brain interprets that information that it's getting in. Now this happens extremely quickly. So to you it seems like at the same time, like it seems like it takes no time, but it does take a little bit of time for that information to reach your brain. Okay? So that's the spinal cord that does that. You're using it, your brain, telling your muscles what to do. Happens quickly, but not instantly. And we're going to be looking at that as we measure reaction time.
Oh, my friend stuck her hand in a boiling pot of water and then she got like stuck and she was like, what do I do?
All right, Tanya?
Okay, I got a question.
Okay.
My sister was in the hospital for 5 months, but this doesn't go. When she was at Shepherd's, it's a rehab place in Atlanta, she said she met this 12-year-old that got in the motorcycle accident. How does it damage your spinal cord?
Well, so now we can talk about that. It should make sense because, so for you to walk to lunch next period, your brain tells the information through nerves into your spinal cord. It travels down your back. Okay, now the nerves that carry information to your legs, they branch out down here. So your brain says, okay, muscles in your legs, move, and so they move. Now, if you get in an accident, if something happens in your spinal cord, this nerve tissue gets broken, gets severed or cut in some way. If it gets cut down here, okay, your brain will still send the messages to your your legs, telling them to move, telling you to walk. So that message comes down through your spinal cord, but it gets to this break, and the message can't go any further. So the message telling your muscles in your legs to move can't get to your legs, and so you can't move them. Your brain sends the information. The muscles still are there. The muscles are not damaged, but the message from your brain to those muscles telling them to move is not able to get there. Therefore, a person can't move their legs. Now, if a person gets a spinal cord injury, the farther up it happens, is that worse for them?
Yes.
Yes, because the farther up that damage is, the more loss of various nerve tissue you get. If that happens really high, a person could lose the use of both their arms and their legs. Okay? If it happens up here, because now this message goes here, but it can't get down far enough to branch out and go down to the arms. Okay? And that does happen sometimes. All right, so some questions. Tanya?
On YouTube, I watched the place that she was at. It's a really good place, but there was this one kid that his bones, like you could see his bones and arms were so skinny.
Oh, really?
How does it get very skinny?
Well, maybe a person that could have an eating disorder and is not eating can lose weight very rapidly and have very, very low body weight, and you know that eventually can be very damaging or can even lead to a person dying from malnutrition. All right, David, I gotta go on to some other questions.
Oh, what if you like hit your head really hard and you damage your brain?
Yeah, sometimes that happens. So a person can have an injury to their brain, like a traumatic brain injury, and that's a little different situation than damage to the spinal cord, because by damaging part of your brain, the functions in your body that are controlled by that part of your brain may not work anymore. There's a certain different parts of our brain control different aspects of our body. You know, so one part of your brain controls your speech, and another part controls emotions, another part controls coordination. So we have all these various parts. Damaging one part may interfere with some of that. Yeah?
So your nerves go around your ribcage too?
Yeah, they go to all the various parts of your organ. Okay? Yeah?
Two things. One, could you just damage the nerves without
Yeah.
damaging your spinal cord?
Sometimes you damage nerves, yeah.
Will they ever be able to get repaired?
Not really. Nerve tissue does not heal very well. It's not like skin tissue, where if you get a cut in your skin, after a week or so, it sort of fills back in and gets replaced. Nerve tissue does not heal very well at all. There may be some partial healing of nerves, but for example, most people with a severe spinal cord injury, it doesn't get better. The spinal cord doesn't grow back together. Okay. Now, if there's like a partial damage, it may heal a little bit, but it's an area of research where doctors and scientists and researchers are really working on, because if we could have a way of helping that nerve tissue repair itself, it could help a lot of people recover from these injuries. Yeah.
Is it possible for the vertebrae to break right where it meets the brain?
It could, but even like if you sever your spinal cord up very high, it could lead to death. Okay, because those nerves that control other major organs.
And so even when they're not doing anything, our brain is still like working, like it's still like.
So your brain's always doing something.
Yeah. So like even when we're sleeping, it's.
Yeah, because like if you're dreaming or something, your brain's still working.
If if you're breathing, you're doing something.
Yeah. All right, we need to move on though. All right, see you last question, then we gotta go.
I've had 2 questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Well, like whoever said the brain injury, my brother got 6 straight in a row concussions. And if he gets one more, he'll be brain damaged in some part back here.
Yeah, we're gonna talk, next week we'll have videos and some articles to read about concussions, because
And then-
concussions is important to learn about.
And then two, say like Tina was saying, I hate everyone in my house.
All right, go ahead.
So if like you hit it up here,
Yeah.
like and like.
All right, let's
And
move on.
what if you lose weight? Like, could that like cause something like losing weight? Like if you.
Like nerve damage?
Yeah.
I mean, it could if it's carried out to an extreme measure. I guess it could. Certainly, like a lack of vitamin B12. We talked about people that don't eat any animal products. They have a lack of vitamin B12. That could lead to nerve
Do
damage
you have a
too.
lack of vitamin B12?
No, hopefully not. All right, we need to move on.
Hopefully.
We'll have more time for other questions as we continue, but we got to get going here a little bit. All right, and then the nerve. So we have the brain, sends a message down the spinal cord, which sends the message down to various nerves. We see them in green here, which spread throughout the body. And they send these signals to various parts of the body. They bring information to the brain and away from the brain both. So those are some of the major organs, but there's some other parts as well. We need to take in information. We take in information from the outside world. And as you know, from when we talked about living things, we call those stimuli. Okay, it's stimulus, information that comes in. So stimulus is information received by your nervous system. So our nervous system is constantly taking in information about our surroundings and also about our internal conditions. Okay? And then our body may respond to some of these stimuli. A response is how your body reacts.
Why do people like when they hurt themselves? Why do they just kind of like my friend did stuck her finger and put it in water? Like didn't take it out because she was all in shock or something.
I'm not sure about that. Usually they would take it out immediately because it's a reflex.
But like no, like it was a reflex. But like she like did like she like held it in there and she didn't know like. Yeah, it was a shock.
Yeah. Well, we went over the characteristics, needs of living things, and all living things respond. Yes. All right. So some examples. You know, of stimuli: hunger, cold, taste like salty or sweet, brightness. All sorts of things are stimuli. All this information. You know, temperature, a sense of temperature, or heat, or pressure, texture. All those things are stimuli. And response, you know, might be to avoid something, to jump, to yell, to smile, to run. All those things are how your body reacts to some of these stimuli.
So was that like when I was sitting in the back and smashed?
You know, I smacked the ruler, the stimulus was the sound, and your response was to jump or for your heart rate to increase.
Hold on, I'm not done.
All right.
I wasn't sure.
So the brain, as we said, is a very important organ. It is made of billions, 100 billion or more, what we call neurons. A neuron is one single individual nerve cell. So if you remember, when we talked about the organization of life, what would you call the brain? Where is the brain on those different levels? Holly?
Organ or
It's an organ. Okay. So what do we know? Organs are made of what?
Tissue.
Tissue. Tissue is made of what? Cells. The brain is made of neurons, nerve cells. And the brain does many things. It interprets message, information coming in, sends messages out. Okay? And the brain has different regions, different areas that have various functions, that control different parts of our body, that interpret information from various senses. The brain is quite complex. And these 100 billion or so neurons in the brain, they all interconnect. Okay? And when you do something over and over again, you reinforce some of those pathways, some of those neurons. That's one of the reasons you get better at things the more you do them. Okay? If you practice your violin every single day, so you go through repeated patterns with your fingers, as you do that, the network of neurons which interprets that information and controls your fingers, it gets reinforced and gets stronger, and nerve impulses are able to make their way more easily, and the lining around the neurons that control that gets larger and thicker. And so it becomes easier to do. It becomes more automatic. You can do it more quickly. When you practice things, part of the reason why you improve at them is because of how our neurons work.
I played piano for 3 years and next year I'm starting that again. But the reason isn't because I'm getting much better and I can go really fast now. Is it because of my neurons are getting much stronger or much?
Yeah, you could think about it in that way, in that as we use certain neurons more, around the neurons, you see this is a layer of insulation called myelin. And it gets thicker the more we use them. And so that means the nerve impulses that control your fingers, the information gets there more quickly. So you're able to play those patterns or play those scales more quickly. Same thing with the sport. If you're playing soccer, okay, and you're working on some move, okay, the more you practice it, the more you do it over and over again, the better you get at it. Shooting foul shots, all those things. We improve by using and practicing and doing those things over and over. Okay, our spinal cord connects our brain to the rest of our nerves in our body, runs through the vertebrae, and it's surrounded and protected by the vertebrae, the backbone. So here you can see the picture of the brain, the spinal cord, and the vertebrae that helps to protect it.
If you damage your vertebrae, will it still damage your spinal cord?
Not necessarily. You could damage the bones in your vertebrae, but if you don't damage the internal spinal cord, then you don't lose any nerve function.
So you wouldn't become paralyzed if
No.
you were damaged to that bone?
Not necessarily. You could. If you really damage it badly, it could damage the spinal cord within
If it
it.
was just like a crack or
Yeah,
something like that,
yeah.
you might-
With this break you were talking about, that space, is that why you get like the 12-year-old got paralyzed? Or is it something else?
It's damage to the actual spinal cord, not the bone itself. Alright, so the nervous system, which is used for communication, communicates with something called a nerve impulse. A nerve impulse is basically a signal that's sent from one place to another. And it works using electrical and chemical signals. So it starts as a stimulus that the brain interprets, and the brain can then send out a response. So an individual nerve cell we call a neuron, and they have a unique shape. So this doesn't quite look like the cells that we labeled a few months ago in our cell unit, but this is one cell, it's a neuron, but it has some characteristics that allow it to do its job. So if we look at this nerve cell, we look at its parts, its job is to receive and then send messages. It's basically the communication lines within our body.
Don't change it yet.
So the main area, the largest part of a neuron is this part over here. It's called the cell body. Okay, it's the main sort of area of the nerve. What do you think is inside of the cell body? Yeah, that's the nucleus.
Your lines are really confusing.
Just like it is in your nose.
No.
Cell body, and that's the nucleus. All right, now surrounding the cell body, all these little branches, those are called dendrites.
Is it just the ones that split open or the ones?
All of these around the outside, those are called the dendrites. Their job is to receive information in.
Dendrite.
And then the information travels down this sort of elongated part of the neuron. That's called the axon.
They all look different. Do they all look pretty much the same?
No, they all look different. Some have lots of dendrites, some have a few. Some, the cell body's very large and the axon's very small. There's all sorts of different variations. Then the final part, these ends, are called the terminal. All right, so let's talk about what these things do. So this is just another view of the nerve, a neuron.
Oh, it's so bright.
It's also labeled for you, with all the parts. The cell body is like the main headquarters of the neuron. It has the nucleus in there, and cytoplasm, and mitochondria, and other things. All those cell parts, they're in there in the cell body.
Is there an AIS science?
Yeah, that's great. So we have these dendrites surrounding the cell body. Their job is to sort of listen for messages. They're connected to other, sort of associated with other neurons. And they can get information from another neuron. And obviously they have lots of little branches, so they can sort of gather up messages from many neurons. And then once they receive a message, what they do is they turn that into an electrical signal. Your nervous system works using electricity. An electrical current travels from the dendrites down to the terminal. One of the reasons why an electrical shock can kill you, because it interferes with the functioning of your nervous system. Okay, your nervous system controls your heart.
Did you mean like getting struck by lightning?
Yeah, because that
But
huge
yeah.
volt of electricity interferes with all the nerve function because they're working on these electrical signals. Hold on, I want to finish this slide, then if there's time, I'll answer your question. All right, so this electrical signal travels from the dendrites down this axon and carries it down here. Along the way, you can see, and they're outlined in blue here, this is that insulation I was talking about. That allows this electrical, just like a wire is insulated, you know, your house has some protective layer on the outside. Well, the axon has layers of insulation surrounding it as well to allow that message to travel well. And eventually it gets down to the terminal, the ends of the nerve cell.
Is that where it tells you like to do something?
It may, these terminals may be near a motor neuron that tells your muscles to move, or they may be near another neuron that gets sent to the next neuron, and the next one, and the next
Take
one,
it the same that
until it reaches
Until it reaches that
the end.
terminal.
Yes.
Can I make a guess? The
Hold on.
synapse is the
And finally, there's a little space here. So this is going to be another neuron over here that this message is getting sent on. But if you'll notice, the terminal of one neuron, it doesn't physically connect to the dendrites of the next neuron.
That's what this name is also talking about.
So that's called a synapse. That gap in the way the message gets from one neuron to another is through special chemicals called neurotransmitters, which are released from the terminal and attached to the next dendrite.
So Mr.